Chapter 6. Riley left work at top speed on Thursday. She had hoped Blake would be at the taco truck at lunchtime, but he hadn't made an appearance. Her family had probably scared him off, because they were slightly insane. When she got home, she ran in the door and changed out of her jeans and t-shirt, pulling the dress she'd laid out for the night over her head. Hurrying into the bathroom, she put her hair up into a messy knot and touched up her lipstick. The doorbell rang just as she finished. Hurrying to the door, she smiled. "Why, Pastor Blake? What are you doing here?" He laughed, catching her hand and pulling her toward his car. "Let's get on the road." Happily. She was excited to go with him, though she had no idea where they were going. "Where are we eating?" "There's supposed to be a good Chinese place in Riston. I thought we'd go there." "Sounds good. There's also a restaurant at Reverend Ranch. They do trivia on Thursday nights, and it's a ton of fun. I can't remember what time it starts, so we might be a little late, but there are always tables to join if they have started without us." He thought for a moment. "That actually sounds like a lot of fun. Would you mind doing that?" "I'd love it. I really think the best way to get to know someone is not to spend time alone with them, but to spend time with other people. They can change their actions for you, but they're not likely to change them for a whole group of people. You tend to see through the facade." He smiled. "That's exactly why I decided to go to your family's Memorial Day celebration. I wanted to watch you with your cousins and siblings." "Oh, there will be tons of cousins and siblings to watch me with." Riley was glad they were going to trivia night, though. She thought it would be good for both of them. She gave him directions to the restaurant and had to laugh when people looked up from their trivia questions and greeted her when she walked in. It looked like the entire Weston clan was there, and she hurried over to hug Kelsey, who she'd made friends with years before. "Where are the babies?" "Mom's in town, so we left them with her." "All three of them?" "I needed a break, and Shane thought this was the best idea ever. So here we are at trivia night." "Do you love trivia night?" Riley asked. "If I lived closer, I'd be here every Thursday." "Oh, yeah," Kelsey said. "I wish I could come more myself, but with 3 children under the age of 3, it's hard to accomplish much." Riley realized then she was ignoring Blake. "This is Blake. He's the new pastor in Quinn Valley." "Blake, this is my friend Kelsey. We went to high school together, and we've been friends ever since." Kelsey turned her smile and big blue eyes on Blake. "So nice to meet you, Pastor. Just call me Blake. It's nice to just be me for a change." "I'm sure." Kelsey led them to a table. "We have room for 2 more." Riley quickly introduced Blake to everyone at the table. "This is Shane, the sheriff of Riston and Kelsey's husband." She moved on to his left. "This is Danny, Kelsey's only sister, and her husband Travis." Blake nodded. "Nice to meet you all. That is Miranda, the baker here at River's End, who makes the best collages in all the world." Miranda laughed, shaking her head. "I don't know that I would say they're the best." "I would." "And beside her is Bob Blakely, Kelsey's nemesis, and the chef at Kelsey's Cafe." Bob shrugged. "I'm only her nemesis because she won't admit that I'm the best chef this side of the Mississippi." Kelsey rolled her eyes as she sprinkled something in a little green can onto her French fries. "Sit. There's room, and someone will be by to take your order in a minute." Riley took the seat beside Kelsey, and Blake sat beside her. She picked up a menu and held it where they both could see it, whispering, "The Weston kids all help run the ranch, and each has their own area of expertise. Kelsey runs the cafe, and Danny orders everything the ranch needs. She prefers her quiet little office, with no one bothering her." "Makes sense to me," Blake said, glancing at the menu as they spoke. "How are the Delicious, everyone at the table said at the same time, and Blake laughed. I guess it's all good, then. Yup, Riley said. I'm getting the chicken fettuccine Alfredo. Oh. That sounds really good. I'll loan you some of my Cajun seasoning for it, Kelsey told him. I promise you will never want to eat anything without it for the rest of your life. Danny shook her head at her twin. You're the only person who orders it by the barrel. You're going to die of no blood in your salt stream someday. Maybe. But I'll die happy. The waitress came then and took their order. After she was gone, Blake asked, what happened to the trivia? 20-minute break between rounds, Kelsey responded, resting her head on Shane's shoulder. Then we start all over again. They had their food and were eating before the next round started. And they were off. After they left the restaurant hours later, Blake smiled down at Riley. It was fun just being a normal dating couple for the night. Not the princess of her city along with a new pastor who has designs on her virtue. Riley stopped walking and laughed. Designs on my virtue? Really? Should you be telling me that, Pastor? I probably shouldn't, but you're so honest about everything, I can't seem to help myself. I definitely have designs. She slipped her fingers through his and rested her head on his shoulder as they walked. I'm not at all offended. Designs on me make me happy, because I have some designs on you, too, baby cakes. Did you just call me baby cakes? I believe I did. Did you like it? I don't even know how to respond to that. I would probably have to say no. Especially not in public. So when we're alone, I can call you baby cakes? He sighed. I would really rather you didn't. Then I'll find something better. Pastor Pretty. How's that? Riley asked. Keep trying. Sometimes he wasn't sure what to do with her, but he was glad she was with him. Always glad. They were both tired and mostly quiet on their drive home. I didn't mean to keep you out so late. It's going to be well after 11 when I get you home. Don't worry. I haven't had a curfew in years. Glad to hear it. Blake told her. You look so young that I sometimes worry I'm robbing the cradle. She laughed. Well, over 18. I promise. I guess that's good. Over 21? He asked. Yup. Good enough for me. He pulled up in front of her house. Thanks for an amazing evening. I had so much fun playing with everyone. And you were amazing when we hit questions on the Bible. Everyone was impressed. He shook his head. I know what a pastor should. This is true. They walked together up to the door, and he leaned down and kissed her. I have to work on my sermon for Sunday tomorrow. I want to have it all in line before Saturday. Can I take you out Saturday night? Depends on where you want to take me, she said softly, smiling up at him. How about that Chinese place? He asked. Are you worried about being seen in public with me? I mean where people know us. Not at all. I just kind of want to get to know you without your family watching our every move. Not a bad idea, she said, feeling a little better. But you don't mind going on Monday? No, because that will be different. Everyone is supposed to check me out at a family party. At lunch, people should leave us alone. Riley nodded. I'm sorry my family is such a pain. They're not a pain. I want to know you. I want time where we're not constantly interrupted. I wouldn't feel comfortable eating alone with you, but I'm good with no one we know around us, if that makes any sense at all. I think it does. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him once more. I'll miss you tomorrow. He smiled, stroking her cheek. Sweet dreams. You too. She went in and closed the door behind her, leaning back against it. She hoped he was telling her the whole truth about why they kept leaving town for dates. Spending time with him was important to her, but not at his occupational detriment. She walked over and picked out a few crystals from the boxes she kept them in and put them on her nightstand. She needed good dreams. Asterisk. The next day dragged by for Riley. She hadn't realized just how much she wanted to see him every day and spend every waking moment with Blake. It was crazy how entwined their lives had become in less than a week. She tried not to mope around at work, knowing her mother would have something to say about it. She had a very sunshiny personality, and Riley almost felt guilty for being down in her mother's presence. After work, she met up with Raina to talk about her wedding plans. As my maid of honor, I really need us to go looking at wedding dresses soon. Is there any chance you can get a Saturday off? Or do I need to take a Monday? We could go on Monday morning before you go in. You just do half days on Monday, and Saturdays are a full day for me. If we do it quick, Dad can't kill us for missing work. Dad hasn't killed us yet. What makes you think he's going to start? Because he doesn't like us to take off any time during tourist season. You know that as well as I do. Raina shrugged. It'll be fine. You're the spa's only massage therapist. How could it possibly be fine? I'll work extra hours to make up the difference. Dad will deal. Riley shook her head. Okay, but I'm telling him it's your idea. She made a face at her sister. Now Roxanne isn't standing up with you, right? Because of how pregnant she'll be? She said no, which is fine. You and Renee can do it without a problem. I think I want to go with a pink and mint green for my colors. One of you can wear one color, and the other can wear the other. Works for me. I don't care what I wear. You're being too easygoing, and it's scaring me. Why aren't you with Pastor Hunky tonight? Pastor Hunky? I don't think he'll like that. I know he doesn't like Pastor Pretty, Riley told her sister with a grin. Raina shook her head. You really called him that? Well, he didn't like baby cakes. So I went with something different. Very smart of you, Raina said with a sigh. I'm surprised you two have lasted so long. Isn't 5 days like a record for you? 7 is, thank you very much. He's planning on doing Memorial Day at Grandma and Grandpa's. He can't break it off until after that. Why can't he? Raina asked. Because then I would have to throw rocks at him, and no one wants that. Raina just shook her head. You're as much of a mess today as you were 10 years ago. I'll take that as a compliment. Asterisk. Saturday was busier than it had been at the hotel. Memorial Day weekend was the beginning of the summer season, and people were taking advantage of it. Renee, as always, was the busiest of them. Riley wondered for the millionth time if she should take time off and go to massage school. She knew it would help the family, and she could practice some of her energy work while doing the massages. It was a thought, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to do it just then. There were no classes there in Quinn Valley, and she would need to drive all the way to Lewiston. But they did need a better spa. She sighed. She'd talked to her dad about it to see what he thought. If he was in favor of it, and willing to pay for it, she'd do it in a heartbeat. Her last appointment slot of the day wasn't booked, so she hurried home and showered before her date. She dressed in jeans and a nice top, knowing that the Chinese restaurant was more on the casual side. When Blake arrived, she opened the door and walked into his arms. Why does it feel like it's been forever since I've seen you when, in reality, it's been less than 48 hours? As soon as she said it, she wondered if she was getting too clingy. She knew men hated that, and it had usually been the other way around in her relationships. I hated not seeing you at all yesterday, but my sermon is ready, and I practiced it all morning. Are you going to keep the crystals in your pocket during the sermon? He shrugged. I probably will. I'm not sure I believe they will keep me calm, but since you do, I'll use them. Thanks for not just dismissing me as being insane. I try not to be insane on Saturdays. Only on Tuesdays. That makes a lot of sense. You should always be insane on a workday and not when you have time off. I'm glad you understand me. She grabbed her purse and a sweater. Do you really need a sweater at night in the summer? He asked. It's in the 30s or 40s most nights during the summer here, due to the high altitude. Yes, I need them. All right, then. Take your sweater. Once they were in the car headed toward Riston, she asked him what his sermon was about. I thought I'd tackle gossip. It seems to be a needed topic in this town. Riley laughed so hard she had tears. That's perfect. I don't know why I find it so incredibly funny, but it's a great idea. Yeah, Pastor Dahl said he does a sermon on gossip at least once a year. No one ever listens to him, but I'm going to try anyway. Good for you. Riley smiled over at him. It's odd that I'm sitting in a car with you, and I'm planning to kiss you, and I know you have a sermon in the morning. Don't pastors deserve to be kissed? He asked. I sure think they do. I guess it depends on how that sermon goes tomorrow. That will let me know if you deserve more kisses or not. I'm sure it will. He shook his head. My mother warned me about girls like you. Ones that tease you? No, ones that make me feel like my entire world needs to revolve around them. She smiled. My whole world is starting to revolve around you as well. I'm glad you came to our little town. So am I. I cannot imagine going my whole life without meeting the one woman God created just for me. And I surely believe that's who you are. So you're not breaking up with me tomorrow? She asked. Why on earth would I break up with you tomorrow? Because I've never dated a man for more than 7 days, and today is day 7. I'm thinking about hiding from you and turning off my phone so that I can for sure make it through tonight and tomorrow. He shook his head. There's no way I'm going to break it off with you. I hope you know that. He made a right turn into downtown Reston, which was really just a small town that had grown up because of Rivers End Ranch. So what time do I need to pick you up on Monday for the Memorial Day festivities? Around 10. We'll eat at noon, so everyone gets there between 10 and 11. We're required to take a dish, but I'll make enough for both of us. He pulled up in front of the restaurant and turned to her. You cook? I cook. Not always happily, but I can do it. My mother hates to cook, so we all took as many homemaking classes as the school offered so we could cook for ourselves and Dad. Mom makes one dish, and that's lasagna. That's it. So every single time we do one of these things at Grandma's house, we have lasagna with us. That's funny. I hope you like lasagna. Only my mom's. I swear it's the best lasagna in all the world. I could eat it every day. He shook his head. Are all of you Quinns as quirky as you and your mother are? Of course. Just call us the quirky Quinns. I love the alliteration on that, don't you? I'm not a big fan of alliteration, but I really do like quirky Quinns. My sister thinks you should be Pastor Hunky, but I really prefer Pastor Hot Stuff. Just so you know. He sighed. I'm not letting you give me a ridiculous nickname. Not now, and not ever. Well, what fun is dating you, then? She wrinkled her nose at him. I'm a lot of fun. As long as you call me Blake. Riley sighed. Fine, I'll call you Blake. Just know what a huge sacrifice I'm making. Chapter 7. Blake pulled up in front of the restaurant, parallel parking on the street, because there was no parking lot. We made it safely. I wasn't worried we wouldn't. Riley looked at him quizzically, trying to understand why he'd just announced that to her. Well, with you being constantly worried we're going to break up and with you trying to give me strange names that make me crazy, I thought I should probably announce it. Very good of you, she told him, nodding encouragingly. I thought so. He walked around the car and opened her door for her. Together, the two of them walked in, and he found a table. It was relatively quiet for a Saturday night, but he had a feeling the ranch got a whole lot busier on the weekend. She picked up her menu and immediately chose orange chicken. It was her go-to for Chinese food, and then she closed her menu. She sat back in her chair and waited for him to figure out what he was having. When he had closed his menu, he smiled. What are you getting? Orange chicken. It's my favorite. I always waffle between orange chicken and sweet and sour chicken. Sweet and sour chicken is my second favorite. Why don't we get both and share, she suggested. I would absolutely love that. He stacked his menu atop hers. Now, tell me exactly what to expect from the Quinn holiday celebration. The unexpected. The waitress appeared, and they both gave their orders. He waited until the waitress was gone before frowning at her. Really? Expect the unexpected? I would think the Quinns are more than just a cliché. We are. But you never know what's going to happen. We'll get there around 10:15, and lunch won't be until noon. Everyone will want to meet you, and I'll introduce you around. Grandma and Grandpa will announce the contest during lunch, and they'll have an indoor and outdoor option. And there's always some sort of trophy for the winning family. Well, usually. We don't always do everything as family units, but usually we do. I see. Will I be lumped in with your family? He asked. Of course. No one's stealing you from us. I don't care how much others beg. You belong to the Bob Quinn family and no one else. Wait, if I belong to your family, will I get a silly nickname like Bobling? Riley shook her head. What's your obsession with the name Bobling anyway? We all love it. It's just terrible. If Bobling loved it, he'd be using the name right now. But no, he changed his name to Jake. Blake shook his head, wondering why she couldn't see what he saw so clearly. So are you saying I can't call my brother Bobling anymore? Because I think that's just a little bit crazy. He's always been Bobling. I know that. I understand that. I still think it's a terrible name for a full-grown man. Do you have a picture of Bobling? Riley nodded, pulling her phone from her purse and scrolling to her emails with her brother. He almost always included a picture for her. April Lynn had asked him to do that for Riley when she was small, so she wouldn't forget him, and it had become a habit. She sent pictures right back. She pushed her phone toward him with the picture up. There. That's Bobling. He picked it up and studied the face of a muscular man with dark hair and eyes. His coloring was actually very similar to Riley's. I promise you that this man does not want to be called Bobling by anyone. Not by his sisters or his mother or father. Or even his grandmother. He prefers Jake, and that's what he's going to want to be called when he gets home. I'm not sure I can. She knew it would be a simple request, but Bobling had been one of her first words. She loved everything about her brother, including his nickname. I'll help you. Every time I hear you call him Bobling, I'm going to remind you, in the sweetest way possible, that he prefers to be called Jake. All right. I'll try. Their food arrived then, and they spent the next couple of minutes dividing it up. Are you nervous about your sermon tomorrow? She asked. Not nearly as nervous as I was last week. It's the crystals. He frowned. It's more likely that it's the fact that I've spoken in front of the congregation before. She studied him for a moment. I'm thinking about taking some time off work and going to classes for massage therapy. I think it's time. She had a feeling it would please him if she did. But the hotel needed her to step up. Why? Do you not have enough work? She shrugged. I'm really only busy during tourist season. I mean, I work every day, but I'm doing stuff like laundry that needs to be done when I'm between clients. I'd rather work more and do fewer household chores for the spa. Don't you have a sister who is a massage therapist already? He asked. He tried not to show how pleased he was at the idea. He didn't want her being a crystal healer. It was a much more acceptable job for a pastor's wife to be a massage therapist. I do, and she's always swamped. People have to book a massage a few weeks before they even get to the hotel if they want to get in with her. We're always turning people away. I think my dad would pay for the massage therapy school if I was willing to commit to working in the hotel, which, of course, I would. Sounds like a good idea to me. If you want to do it. I'm still on the fence, but I think I want to be more needed, if that makes sense. A hotel our size should have more than one massage therapist, and I like the idea of having more clients for sure. Then they could hire someone else to do all the laundry I keep doing. Well, then talk to your dad. You could even do it at the huge Quinn family extravaganza. Blake was unsure what else to call her family gathering. The mere idea of going was starting to intimidate him. I'll be gone a lot more. Is that going to bother you? She asked. No. Do what you need to do, and I'll be fine. He would never stand in the way of her bettering herself. All right. She grew silent as she ate her meal. He watched her, wondering what was going on in her mind. Her thought process was so strange to him that he was never sure what she was thinking. Did I do something wrong? Or say something I shouldn't have? He asked after her head had been down for a while. I was just kind of hoping you'd want me around a little more. She shrugged. I thought we were getting closer than you obviously think we are. We are getting close, he said softly. I just don't want to hold you back from doing what you want to do. She nodded, wishing she didn't feel the sting of tears at the back of her eyes. She was feeling over-emotional this week, and she wished she could just stop it. All right. His hand covered hers. I'm so sorry I made you feel badly. He hadn't meant to, and now that he understood where she was coming from, he wanted to kick himself. The girl was the sweetest person he knew, and he had no idea why she wasn't more confident in relationships. She shrugged. I'll be fine. I just wasn't sure if you really wanted me around or not. Of course I do. I can't imagine a single day without you. Well, there would be lots of days without me if I was doing classes in Lewiston. It's a drive, and the classes are 6 hours a day. Ah. I understand, then. Blake shook his head. I'm still not going to hold you back, but you'd better be talking to me driving there and back. I will miss you horrifically. You might find me camping on your front lawn, begging for a glimpse of you. She laughed softly, brushing away the single tear that had fallen. You're silly. You don't have to humor me, you know. I'm not humoring you. I'm genuinely that love-struck over you. Riley sighed. Sorry for getting emotional. I try to hold things in, but sometimes I just lose it. And he'd used the word love. Well, love-struck. Did that mean he was actually falling in love with her? Really and truly? You don't have to hold things in around me. I'm not going to know the real you if you do that. And I desperately want to know the real you. She happily went back to eating her Chinese food, glad she was with a man who was so loving and kind. Thank you for putting up with me. I'm not just putting up with you. I'm relishing every single moment we spend together. You're awfully special to me, Riley Quinn. He suddenly grinned. I want to call you Harley Quinn. She laughed. That's my grandpa's name. I always giggle when I think about it. I can understand that. It's funny. He was glad the whole thing had been smoothed over and she could laugh again. He hated to see her sad. After they'd finished their meal and paid, they went back out to the car for their drive home. Did you go to high school in Riston? Riley nodded. We all did. There's only one high school in the whole county, and the rest of us are bust. That's why I know all the Rivers End Ranch people. I went to school with them. I'm glad you're not limited in friendship to Quinn Valley. I keep waiting for someone to bow before the princess, but no one does. She laughed. No one ever will either. It would make me crazy if that happened. I can understand that. So, I was wondering if you wanted to have lunch with me after church tomorrow. I'm sure we could find something yummy. He kept his eyes on the road as he drove along the highway back to Riston. He wished there were interstates to travel between the two places, but it was just a two-lane highway, and he'd been warned that deer and moose liked to jump out in front of cars, especially at night. I would love that. Are you planning to leave Quinn Valley again? Or do you want to go back to the pub? I think the pub was nice. I wish I could hear Ivy sing. I'm assuming she doesn't usually sing in the afternoons. She doesn't. But I think she's on the schedule for Saturday night. We should have gone tonight, but maybe next Saturday. If they were still together. She kept waiting for him to end things, but she was so glad he hadn't yet. I would love to go listen next Saturday night. Do we need to get there early to get a table? Usually. Maybe you can get a table around 5:30, and I'll head right over after work. If they were still together. Obviously, he thought they would be. I think that's a great idea. I can take some work to do and ignore everyone until my princess arrives. Ivy's a princess, too. Don't go making her jealous. He grinned. There's only one princess I care to be with. The others can get just as jealous as they want. She shook her head. I can't believe you're slighting my sisters and my cousins. You have to be first in my mind. That's good by me. Just keep that opinion to yourself. Riley couldn't believe how close they'd gotten in such a short period of time. Though she was still feeling a little unsure of herself in the romance arena, he didn't seem to find her lacking. When they reached her house, he walked her to her door and kissed her softly. Lunch at the pub after church, and then maybe we can do a movie this weekend. The theater in town is playing the live-action Aladdin. I want to see it. I cannot believe that Will Smith is playing the genie. So exciting. Yes, I want to go. Yes, yes, yes. Then we'll do that. Don't tell anyone, but I'm a closet Disney fan. We went as often as we could while we were growing up. World or land? She asked. World. It was closer. And bigger. I've only ever been to Disneyland. I've dreamed of going to Disney World. Maybe we'll do that together someday. She smiled, liking the idea a lot. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him once more. All right. I need to get to bed if I'm going to be up for church in the morning. And I have a feeling that I'm going to really enjoy looking at the pastor this week. I wonder if he'll mind. Blake laughed. Not at all. He's just happy you like him. So much. With that, Riley went inside and closed the door. The more time she spent with him, the more time she wanted to spend with him. It was a vicious cycle. Asterisk. Riley was early for church the next morning, and she talked to people like she did every Sunday morning. She couldn't help but notice that there was still a throng of women surrounding Blake, but that was only to be expected. They'd back off soon enough. She hoped. Right before the service started, she moved to sit with her family. Her parents were already there, and so were Renee and her husband. No one else had made it so far. During the sermon, Riley was sure she was looking at Blake with lovesick puppy eyes, and his eyes looked directly at her multiple times. He was a great deal calmer this week, and there was no telltale shaking of his hands. As she watched him, she realized just how good he was at his job, and she was very proud of him. As soon as church was over, there was a crush of women going to talk to him at the front of the church once again. She decided to walk over and join the throng, because she wanted to see if he'd acknowledge her and their relationship. She walked over, and his whole face lit up when he saw her join the group of women surrounding him. "Does everyone know Riley Quinn?" he asked. The other girls all nodded. He didn't reach out and take her hand or anything, but the look he gave her told the other girls everything. Kara, a girl Riley had known her entire life, sighed heavily. Of course it would be a Quinn who would catch his eye. "I think that family is blessed. Or magic. Or something." The group of women disappeared and left Riley there with Blake. "Do you feel rescued?" Riley asked. "Yes. Thank you so much. I need to stick around for a little longer. Do you want to meet me there again? Or do you want to wait?" He really didn't care as long as they got to spend time together in a little while. Riley shrugged. "I'd like to get out of my girl clothes and change back into me." He chuckled. "I was just thinking how beautiful you look in that dress." "Thank you. You look pretty incredible in your suit." She grinned at him. "I'm going to go home and change, and I'll see you in a little while." He watched her leave, glad that she'd interrupted the women around him. He'd heard a couple of the men in the congregation call the women his harem, and he really didn't want that description to stick. He went home, changed, and met her at the pub, where Ivy was once again their server. "I want to eat the same thing I ate last week," he told Riley's cousin. "The shepherd's pie." "All right, and I know that's what Riley wants, so I'll put the order in." Ivy turned and walked away. She obviously had something on her mind that had nothing to do with her work. "Your sermon was so smooth this morning. You didn't seem nervous at all," and every Quinn looked slightly ashamed. Most of the women in the whole church looked ashamed, honestly. Riley was so excited to tell him what a wonderful job he'd done. He grinned. "I guess I did all right, then. I doubt it will make a big difference. Most of those sermons make a change for a week or two, and then the women go back to complaining about everything." "Yup. That's how it will work. But you tried and did your best. That's what really matters." "I know it is." He reached over and took her hand, right there in the full view of everyone in the pub, and it was a popular lunch place after church on Sundays. She was surprised when he held her hand, but she liked it. Maybe he was getting over his worry about everyone there after all. After lunch, they split up, and she went home to start on her laundry. She couldn't do it the next day, but she could definitely hurry and get it done on Sunday. She practically floated through the house as she did her Monday housework on Sunday. She was in love, and there was nothing wrong with her world. Chapter 8. Blake was punctual as always when he picked Riley up on Monday morning. She had something in her hands, and he wondered about it. "Is that food?" She nodded. "Of course. What did you think it was?" He shrugged. "I had no idea, really. I didn't know if there was a birthday I didn't know about or something like that." "What did you make?" "Just a salad. I wanted to make something that would go well with Mom's lasagna. I usually at least cook something, but we were out late, and I didn't feel like it." He laughed, opening her door. "Are you going to hold the salad the whole way? Or do you want to put it in the back?" "Nah, I'll hold it." She gave him directions at every turn, realizing they'd made it 9 days together. If they had made it past a week, then maybe they could really make it last. "Are you nervous about meeting everyone?" "A little. It was weird just meeting the few people I've met. I know I'm going to feel overwhelmed with this huge crowd of people. Just remember, they're going to be more afraid of you than you are of them." Blake frowned at her. "Why would they be afraid of me?" "Oh, they won't. It's just something you're supposed to say when someone is nervous about doing something, so I did. Riley laughed at the confused look on his face. Just doesn't seem to help this time, he said, shaking his head. Trust me. It's going to be just fine. At least you've got meeting my parents out of the way. She directed him to turn into a huge ranch house, and she got out of the car before he could open her door. She knew she'd get harassed if she let him do that with her sisters and cousins watching. Walking to the door, she opened it, calling out, "We're here." Quinn seemed to emerge from every direction. Grandma hurried over and took the salad from Riley. "I see you two are still together." "I think this is a record, Riley." "It is, but who's counting?" Riley hugged her grandmother around the salad bowl. Harley Quinn walked over, looking at the two of them carefully. "I haven't met you yet. Grandpa, this is the new pastor in town. Blake, this is my grandfather, Harley Quinn." Riley watched Blake's eyes sparkle when she introduced her grandpa by name. "It's so good to meet you, Mr. Quinn. I'm becoming fonder of your granddaughter every day." Harley nodded. "Of course you are. She's a good one. And call me Harley. It gets too confusing with so many Quinns around here. We'll make things easier for all of us." "Yes, sir." Blake was glad that Riley was holding his hand, because he felt very out of place with all the Quinns surrounding him. Slowly, Riley introduced him to all of her aunts, uncles, and cousins. When she had finished, he felt utterly and totally exhausted. Leaning down, he whispered, "Can we walk for a minute or two?" Riley nodded, walking toward the door with him. "We really can be overwhelming." "I know that. Definitely. I mean, I enjoyed meeting everyone, but I felt as if I was under a microscope." "You should have. That's how life works in my world." She walked in a slow circle around the house, hoping he'd be able to calm his nerves. "Do you have the crystals I gave you?" He shook his head. "I just used them for the sermon." She sighed. "I don't have extras on me today either. I shouldn't have left my purse." "You should use them every time you think you're going to be nervous about anything. They're wonderful." "All right. I'll try to do better." He slipped his arm around her waist as they talked. "So it's not raining. Does that mean we're doing something outside?" "Yup. Grandma will say that it's too nice a day for everyone to stay inside and underfoot." "Sounds like you've heard that once or twice." "Once or twice a week for 23 years. He chuckled softly. "Well, it must have stuck." As they rounded the last corner, Riley felt a drop of water on her nose. "Afraid to look up," she said. "Is one of my cousins dumping water on us from one of the upstairs windows, or is it starting to rain?" He sighed. "I'm afraid it's starting to rain. Buck up, Buttercup. We're going to be inside this afternoon, and you are going to be all quinned out soon." "All quinned out? How would you describe it?" Riley asked. When they got back inside, there was a huge spread of food in the kitchen. Everyone took a paper plate and a fork and walked around getting whatever they wanted to eat. "I thought about barbecuing, but I was afraid it would rain. I told Harley that my knee was telling me to expect rain, but the old fool wouldn't listen to a word I said," Gertrude Quinn announced to whomever would listen to her. "Your knee is always right, Grandma," Riley said when no one else responded to her. "When is Grandpa going to learn?" "Never," that's when, Grandma responded, and then she got in line with everyone else to serve up food. "I guess we're going to our indoor plan now." I almost feel sorry for Blake, with it being his first Quinn party and all. He should have been broken in a little easier. "I think I can handle it," Blake said, startling Riley. She'd really expected him not to speak unless spoken to. "We're going to have fun anyway," Grandma continued. "I have a great competition ready for you, and as always, Grandpa and I will be the judges." "So it's something creative," Riley whispered to Blake. That means Robin and her family have the upper hand. I'm determined to win this time, though. There's a Memorial Day trophy with the Bob Quinn's family name on it. So do your grandparents go out every year and buy a trophy for each holiday? Blake asked. This whole thing was very strange to him. Not at all. So last year, Uncle Harold's family won because it was a crafty project. So this year, they had to bring it back so the next family could win it. Though if it's crafty again, it'll be all about Robin. She glanced across the room at her cousin, wishing she had a way to get her to stop being so darn good at crafts. It would probably make more sense if Riley just got good at crafts, and she realized it, but she found them boring. That makes more sense. So every trophy is recycled year after year? Yup. Makes it even more fun, because we can get a trophy, and then we miss it when it goes to another section of the family. We have to win. Riley was annoyed that it was another crafty thing. Grandma must have Robin in mind every time she made one of those contests. He laughed. So this is like the Super Bowl of being a Quinn, huh? Yes. Every time is like the Super Bowl of the family. We're insane. Riley freely admitted her family was crazy. Big, lovable, and absolutely belonging in an asylum. What was wrong with that? The two of them found a spot to eat on the sofa, squished up against each other. There was a huge table, but it wasn't nearly big enough for everyone. When they were almost done eating, Grandma stepped into the middle of the room, and everyone grew silent. They knew she was about to announce the contest for the afternoon, and everyone was full of excitement. No matter how many times Quinns competed with each other, the thrill of the moment never ceased. We were going to do a triathlon type thing in the yard, but it's raining, so today's contest will be building card houses. Each family will be given a flat surface and exactly 2 hours. The best house wins the trophy. Blake leaned closer to Riley. Is she serious? Dead serious. That's the only way Quinns know how to be about contests. We're going to build the best darn card houses in all of Idaho. Just watch. Riley liked the idea of this one. If the houses toppled a lot, then they would be more competitive. You're excited about this, aren't you? Blake asked, a little surprised. I warned you how competitive I was. You get to see it firsthand now. Aren't you lucky? Riley took her plate and his into the kitchen and threw them away. She knew her grandfather would build a bonfire with them soon. He always did. The different families started congregating around the card tables that had been set up around the house for them. Grandma had thrown every partial deck of cards she'd ever had into this. Riley had always wondered why she would want a deck of 50 cards. It all made sense now. She stepped up to the table with her sisters and their significant others. Looking over her shoulder, she asked, "Aren't you helping, Mom and Dad?" "Not this time. There's not enough room around the table." For a moment it looked as if Roxanne would offer her place, but then her sister shook her head and put her game face on. They were going to win. They just knew it. Riley started the card house with 2 cards, and they all worked to add to it. April Lynn and Bob walked around looking at the other houses, trying to let their children know what they should do if they wanted to compete. She heard Uncle Harvey yell out, "Spies," at one point, and they all laughed. There were always spies in this competition. A minute before their 2 hours were up, she heard "Oh, no." "What did you do, Joel?" from the table in the kitchen. It was Robin's voice, and Riley smiled. It meant they had a sporting chance for a change. Joel had obviously destroyed their castle. Good. Time. Grandpa called out, and everyone set down their remaining cards and took a giant step away from their tables. They knew the rules in the Quinn household. Grandma and Grandpa wandered around to all of the tables. We're giving 2 scores for each table. Size and prettiness. We'll combine the two scores and the family with the most points wins, Grandma explained when she reached their table. Riley waited to hear their score, but Grandma didn't tell them. Instead, she just walked on to the next table. Ugh. She doesn't want us comparing scores with the other families. I hate it when she's so secretive. There's a lot at stake here. Riley grumbled. Blake really couldn't see what was at stake. It was just a silly contest, but he was afraid to say that. He was sure Riley would elbow him in the stomach or something. She really did become fierce in these competitions. Finally, after 10 minutes of deliberation, the two judges stepped into the middle of the house. I'm not going to give scores for everyone, because that might humiliate some of my grandchildren, and I won't have that, Grandma said. But the winner of the Memorial Day trophy this year is the Bob Quinn family. Riley started singing softly as she watched her parents walk to get the trophy. Her sisters immediately joined in. It took him a moment, but Blake quickly realized they were singing "We Are the Champions." He shook his head and laughed. He wondered if all the other families would have done the same if they'd been the ones to win. Bob held the trophy high above his head as soon as it was in his hands. I want to thank my parents for bringing me up right. I want to thank my beautiful wife for helping me raise amazing children. But most of all, I want to thank the little people who made this possible. Blake stared in shock for a moment, trying to hide his amusement. There was good-natured applause from everyone and cheers from Bob's family. When Bob carried the trophy back to his daughters, they all kissed their fingers and then the trophy. He wondered if each family acted so silly when they won. Riley went into the kitchen to get her empty salad bowl and returned to Blake's side. Time to go, she said softly. Really? It's over? Riley nodded. The only thing any of us care about is who wins the trophy. The trophy has been won, so now we go back to our daily routines. She handed Blake the bowl and stepped to her grandmother, hugging her close. Love you, Grandma. Then she moved to her grandfather and did the same. Until the next holiday. She waved as she headed for the door, Blake just a step behind her the whole way. Once they were in the car, she looked at him. What did you think? I'm not even sure what to think. I can't believe you guys are so competitive about even building card houses. That's a level of crazy competition I have never seen. Riley grinned at him. I warned you. That you did. I guess I didn't believe it could be as crazy as you said. Oh, trust me. There's no need to exaggerate a Quinn gathering. We're as crazy as everyone calls us. She leaned back against the headrest and closed her eyes for a moment. I'm tired. I am, too. It was a big day. He looked over at her. Do you want to grab supper, or do you just want to go home? She yawned. I wish we could be alone together, because I want to eat with you, but I'm sleepy. Why don't we get something quick and then call it a night? Sounds like a smart plan to me. You work tomorrow, right? She nodded. I do. And I don't want to. He laughed. I was thinking maybe we could bowl after work. I noticed there's a bowling alley in town, and I've heard the food is wonderful. Oh, it is. Bowling sounds fun. I haven't been in a few years, but I always enjoyed it when I did. In fact, they did a bowling league for high school students, and I was always part of it. I loved it. Good. We have our plans for tomorrow, then. Blake looked over at her. Tomorrow will be 10 days. Hallelujah. I think we might just be able to make it work after all. Riley shook her head. She was still nervous that he'd call it off at any moment, but if he'd asked her out after being around an entire house full of Quinns, he must be sticking. At least for a while. They went to Subway for supper and ate sandwiches. The conversation was stilted because they were both so tired after the day at her grandparents' house. I'm really glad I got to see you with your whole family around you. I can't wait to meet Jake. I can't wait to see him either. He's going to be here in early August, and he's getting the biggest hug ever. I'm sure he's already looking forward to it. Sister hugs are wonderful. He finished his sandwich and wadded up his paper, tossing it toward the trash can. When he missed, he got up and picked up the paper, putting it into the bin. Riley wadded hers up and tossed it as well, and it went straight into the trash can. She raised her hands above her head. Touchdown. He shook his head. You're mixing your sports references. I'm not a huge sports fan, so I don't care. She wrinkled her nose at him playfully. Are you big into sports? I love the Cubs. Baseball is my favorite, and the Cubs are actually leading their division this year. I'm sure they're going to go to the World Series this year. And win. They're going to win. Cubs, huh? I would have thought the Cardinals. Aren't the Cardinals the Missouri team? Blake nodded. They are, but my dad was from Chicago, and he and I watched the Cubs together. We watched it when they won the World Series for the first time in more than a century. Watching the Cubs, I feel my father's presence. It feels right. I can understand that. I'm truly not a sports fan, but I can't watch certain musicals without thinking of my mom. I can't go four-wheeling without thinking of my dad. I think that's great. Your family is obviously very tight-knit, even though there's so much teasing and playful fighting. Riley smiled. We really are. I consider my sisters my best friends. We did everything together before they all got engaged and married. Do you ever feel left out? Like you're the last one standing? Not really. Bobbling isn't married yet, and he's the oldest. I'm the baby. But she really hoped he would see through her words and realize that she wanted to marry, but only him. You mean Jake? Blake asked with a grin. Absolutely. Jake. Jake. But he still feels like a bobbling. I'm not sure I can bring myself to call him Jake when I see him. I'm sure you'll get used to it. I can't imagine he's going to come home and respond to that ridiculous nickname. He got to his feet. I need to get you home before you turn into a pumpkin. You look exhausted. So do you. Building the perfect card house is hard work. Harder than I'd ever imagined. And a trophy for card house building is just the icing on the cake. They should make it an Olympic event. Riley laughed. Grandmother would be annoyed that people stole her idea, so that's not the kind of thing I'd float around her. Blake pulled up to her house. I'll keep my opinions to myself. They walked together to the front door, and he leaned down to kiss her goodnight. Tomorrow night bowling still on? He asked. Of course. I'm already looking forward to seeing you again. Me too. I can't wait. With one more kiss, he was on his way to the car. Riley watched until his tail lights were out of view. She already missed him. Chapter 9. Riley walked into her father's office at the hotel the following day, finding him sitting behind his desk and talking on the phone. She sank into the chair in front of his desk and waited for his call to be over. She was a little more nervous about the discussion than she'd planned, but she knew it was the absolute right thing for her future. When her father finished his call, he put the receiver in the cradle and turned to Riley, giving her his attention. What's up, Buttercup? She smiled at the greeting he'd always given when she was a little girl. Well, I've been thinking, and I know that's a little scary, but I have an idea that will help both me and the spa. Keep going, Bob encouraged. I think I want to go to massage therapy school and become a massage therapist. We are turning massage clients away, and I'm often sitting there twiddling my thumbs and looking for ways to keep myself busy. Then I could take some of the workload off Raina, but I could still do the crystal sessions when people want them. He nodded. I do think that would be great for both the hotel and for you. When do you want to start? I've been looking up dates, and I could start a class next week in Lewiston. I know it's a huge change, but I want to be able to be more useful. It'll take 16 weeks, so I won't be available to work again until the end of September. That's going to be harder to deal with. Although, you're right, and there aren't a lot of crystal therapy clients who come here. We'll just take that off the spa menu. He nodded briefly. Yes, let's do it. The hotel will, of course, pay for your classes if you agree to keep working here. Absolutely. That's why I want to do it. So I can keep working here with my whole family. Riley was excited. He'd offered to pay rather than making her ask for it. Even though he was her father, he was still her boss, and she didn't want to have to ask. Well, I think it's a plan, then. Just don't let it interfere with everything in your life. Do you have money saved for bills until you finish classes? I do. I just needed help with the cost of the course itself. Other than that, I'll be just fine. Riley got to her feet and walked around the desk to kiss Bob's cheek. Thanks, Dad. You're very welcome. Now go home. It's past your time to be here, isn't it? Actually, I have another half hour, but I don't have a client, so I'm going to head home and change. Blake and I are bowling tonight. It sounds like you two have gotten very close. I'm glad. I think he's good for you, and vice versa. He seems to be a serious man, but every time I've seen the two of you together, he's been smiling or laughing. You already mean a lot to him. Riley nodded. I know. I just worry it's not enough. What do you mean? Bob frowned at his youngest. Well, this is my first relationship to last longer than a week. It's been 10 days. You're going to keep it going, Riley. There's nothing about you that would make a man stop dating you if he had half a brain in his head. Trust me on this. Riley nodded, opening the door to leave. Thanks, Dad. I needed the pep talk as much as I needed the time off and funds for the class. On her drive home, she wondered if her father was right. She certainly wanted him to be. Blake was the man she wanted to spend her life with. She just hoped he was drawing the same conclusion. She changed into jeans and a t-shirt and put her hair in a ponytail before he arrived. No one wanted their hair in their face while they bowled. Once they were in the car on their way to the bowling alley, she asked him how much experience he had bowling. We had a bowling alley in the city I grew up in. I was on a league as a kid, and my dad would take the whole family at least one Saturday a month. I like it. I'm not fabulous at it, but it's enjoyable to me. Once inside, he paid for their lane and chose some food for them. The woman behind the counter told him that it would be brought to their lane. Riley made a strike with her first ball, and Blake got to his feet. I should have guessed you'd be super competitive about bowling as well. I'm a Quinn, she said with a shrug. I know you are. He shook his head, taking his ball and making his approach. He'd downplayed his bowling skills a bit. He'd had 2 perfect games back in Joplin, and he planned to have a great deal more right there in Quinn Valley. When his first ball was a strike as well, Riley narrowed her eyes. He was going to be tough to beat, but she planned to do it. She'd always been the best in her league. He turned around and smiled at her, and Riley realized this was a challenge. He was truly trying to show her that he could be competitive, too. She was thrilled to see this side of the good Reverend. When their food arrived a short while later, he was bowling a perfect game, and she was down by 20 points. She was doing well, but not as well as he was. Why didn't you tell me you were this good? She asked. Would you have still bowled with me? Probably. Riley shrugged. I enjoy bowling, but I would have been mentally prepared to be beaten. Badly. He laughed. You just can't stand losing, can you? Nope. And I'm still not certain that I will. She sat down and took a sip of her root beer, picking up the burger he'd gotten her. When she saw he'd also ordered fried cheese curds, she ran at him, kissing him madly. He was making her day. There was a throat clearing from behind them, and Riley turned to look. It was Kara, the girl from church who'd obviously been interested and angry that Blake had chosen a Quinn. So this is why the pastor doesn't look at anyone else. He's getting everything he needs from Riley. Riley glared, crossing her arms over her chest. You just saw as much affection and passion as we've ever shown one another. She wanted to add that she didn't have the kind of loose morals Kara did, but she restrained herself. Sometimes it was hard taking the high road. That's not how it looked to me. Blake stepped forward. I've kissed Riley and nothing more, not that it's any of your business. I think a lot of her, and I would never put her in a compromising position. So I would appreciate it if you didn't gossip about what you just saw. If it gets back to me, I'm certain that I'll know where it came from. Kara flicked her long blonde hair over one shoulder. I just don't understand how you two started dating so quickly. You didn't give any of the rest of us a chance. We just connected, Riley said. If you were dating him and I wasn't, would it still be a bad thing? I'm getting back to my friends. You're the only one who thinks you're a princess, Riley Quinn. Riley closed her eyes and counted to 10. It sounds like the two of you have a history, Blake said. Oh, we do. She was my best friend until junior high when she liked a boy who was interested in me. He asked me to the dance, and everyone heard about it. I turned him down because of how Kara felt about him, but she's never forgiven me. The antics of junior high girls. I wish she'd outgrow them soon. Do you want to keep bowling? He asked. Or do you want to leave? I'm not letting her interrupt my game. Let's bowl. She walked over and picked out her ball, making her approach. Strike. He grinned, loving her zest for life. No matter what anyone in town said, this was the woman he was going to marry. On their way back to her house a couple of hours later, Riley explained her conversation with her father. It starts next week. I'll be back in time for the get-together at Robin's, though. She eyed him curiously. Do you know Ben's secret? Well, I'm going there planning to officiate a wedding, so I sure hope I know the secret. He took her hand and laced his fingers through hers. I'm going to miss you terribly while you're in training, but I hope it helps you get where you want to go in life. At that moment, all she wanted was to go into his arms. But how could she say that to him? He was a pastor. It's going to be hard for both of us, but it will be worth it in the end. I didn't even have to ask Dad to pay for it. He volunteered. Oh, well, that's great. I'm glad you're taking this step. He parked the car in her driveway and looked at her, immediately moved by her. He wanted to kiss her and never stop, and that was probably not the best idea in the world. Reaching for her, Blake pulled her close to him, well, as close as the console would allow, and kissed her a great deal more passionately than he ever had. One of his hands went to her waist and slid a little bit under her shirt, and he was intoxicated by the feel of her soft, smooth skin. Finally he pulled away, panting as he rested his forehead against hers. That was a mistake. Riley nodded and got out of the car, hurrying to the front door. She needed to be more circumspect around him. She knew he was a pastor. Getting him all riled up, and herself as well, was not the answer. Closing the door behind her, Riley leaned back against it, breathing heavily. She understood what he meant by the kiss being a mistake. She'd taken something that was perfectly decent, and she'd reacted too strongly, making it something they shouldn't have done. She heard Blake drive away, and she knew it was the end of their relationship. How could it be anything else? Asterisk. Riley made arrangements to take Friday and Saturday off work, throwing everything she had into getting ready to start classes the following Monday. She had ignored the text she'd received from Blake, knowing that she wasn't the right woman to marry a pastor. Every time he'd called, she'd simply let the phone go to voicemail, and she'd even paid the spa's receptionist to go out and get her tacos so she wouldn't accidentally run into Blake. She found a couple of books on mussels in the library, and she devoured them while she ate chocolate marshmallow ice cream. She couldn't bear to leave her home and accidentally run into Blake. Asterisk. Blake felt like a fool. He shouldn't have kissed Riley like he had. She was obviously afraid of him now, and she wouldn't even answer his calls. When Sunday morning rolled around and she wasn't at church, he knew that she was finished with him. All he wanted was to be close to her, and all she wanted was to get away from him. He needed to talk to her and apologize for his behavior, but she wouldn't open the door when he went to it. She was avoiding him just as much as she could. On Monday morning, he went to her house before work, and he caught her going to her car with a backpack slung over one shoulder. She was ready to study, and he knew she was off to Lewiston to start her first day of her course. When she spotted him, she stopped walking, tears automatically coming to her eyes. "I know it's over. You don't have to tell me. Just go away, Blake." He felt actual pain in his chest at her words. "I'm so sorry, Riley." Riley nodded, the tears falling down her cheeks. "Me too." She got into the car and drove away. Asterisk. Blake had confirmed what Riley thought. He was breaking it off with her because of her behavior. As she made the long drive to Lewiston, she listened to a book on tape. It kept her mind from thinking of only Blake. She wanted nothing more than to turn around and tell him she was sorry, and she'd never act that way again, well, not until they married at least. But he'd made it clear that an apology wasn't what he was looking for. No, he wanted their relationship to be over, and she wasn't about to beg him to keep seeing her. Throughout the day, her mind was on him, even as she went to lunch with her new classmates. She needed to be friendly with them, because they'd be practicing massage techniques on each other. Asterisk. By the end of the first week of classes, Riley was exhausted. She felt like she was a zombie after driving back and forth and studying for so long every day. When she got home on Friday, Raina called her and asked her to join her at the pub to listen to Ivy sing. Riley was tired, but she knew she needed to go hear her cousin. A little bit of relaxation and dancing was exactly what she needed. She dressed in a nice pair of jeans and a pretty blouse, not really wanting to attract any attention, but knowing that she would be expected to look her best. Arriving at the pub, she was seated at Raina's table and was surprised that Derek wasn't with her. "You lose Derek?" Raina laughed. "Nah. Joel asked him to stay late tonight. There was another rescue, and they're trying to save the lives of a litter of kittens. Oh, I hope they manage. I'd offer to help, but I don't think anyone would be pleased with me if I was feeding a kitten during my classes instead of taking notes." This is probably true. How are you enjoying massage school so far? I'm so excited that you're doing it so I won't have to always carry the load. Yeah, I'm sure. Dad jumped at the idea of me doing it. Raina leaned forward. The real reason I'm here is everyone noticed you and Pastor Blake are never together anymore. What happened? Riley sighed. I really would rather not talk about it. Let's just say I was an idiot, and he broke things off. I'm sorry. Me too, honestly. I truly think he's the only man in the world for me. Riley shrugged. Then talk to me, Blake said from beside the table. I don't want this to be over any more than you do. And I didn't break it off. You did. Riley looked at him with surprise. I didn't. You did. Raina slid out of the booth. I think I'm going to go see what's going on in the kitchen. With those words, she disappeared toward the bar, and Riley stared at Blake. You know you were the one to break it off. When I told you I knew that's what you were doing, you said, I'm sorry. That's breaking it off. Blake sat down opposite her. I was apologizing for letting things get out of hand the way I did. I never should have let that happen. You know as well as I do that it was all my fault. I came on to you in a way I never should have. Wow. So we are both blaming ourselves and thinking the other person never wants to talk to us again. Riley, I can't let you go. Give me another chance. You choose the activity, and on your next day off school, we'll do whatever you want. She tilted her head to one side, studying him. Seriously? You're not worried that I'm going to jump your bones when no one is looking? No, I'm really not. And I hope you're not worried that I'll jump yours. Nah. You're a good boy. I'm the floozy. He laughed. Did you really just call yourself a floozy? You know that word is never used anymore, right? Apparently that's not true, because I just used it. She thought for a moment, desperately wanting to see more of him again. Why don't we drive out to Reverend Ranch tomorrow? We can eat lunch at Kelsey's Cave, and then we can borrow some horses to take up into the mountains. Do you ride? He nodded. I do, but are you sure? I couldn't be surer. Pick me up at 11. I'll have to study and do laundry on Sunday, so after church, I won't see you. Just so you know now. And I can start calling you during your long drives? I wouldn't have it any other way. Riley reached over and entwined her fingers with his. She had no idea why he was still interested, but he obviously was. Chapter 10. Blake and Riley sat together, listening to the music for a while, and finally he got to his feet and held his hand out for her. Dance with me? She nodded. Never before had she danced in his arms, and she was thrilled that she could now show her affection for him openly. Standing in his arms, swaying back and forth to the slow song Ivy was crooning into the microphone, she rested her head on his shoulder. Never had she needed to be as close to a man as she needed that night. He hadn't dumped her. He still wanted her around. After the song ended, he asked, "Have you eaten yet?" I never thought to ask. I haven't. I thought Raina and I were eating together, but she's apparently done with me. He looked guilty for a moment. I talked her into setting it up so we would run into each other. I couldn't keep going with you angry with me. Well, I guess I should have guessed. She and Derek haven't spent an evening apart in forever. I bet she's at the vet clinic now helping him feed the baby kittens. I'm not sure. I just know she was kind enough to help me, to help us. They chose their meals and gave their order, waiting for their food. Blake watched Ivy on the stage, utterly amazed that she was as good as Riley had said. The woman didn't belong in a small town like Quinn Valley. She should be on a big stage somewhere, singing her heart out. She really is wonderful. Riley nodded. I know. I envy her that talent. He looked at her for a moment, a smile growing on his face, but he didn't say a word. You look like you're up to something, Riley said, feeling a bit uncomfortable with the way he was looking at her. I'm just thinking about how very happy I am to be sitting across from you again. Riley, please don't ever ignore my calls that way again. If you're upset with me, let's talk it out, not avoid each other. All right. I promise. She hadn't been willing to have her heart broken worse by him telling her that he was done with her, but avoiding him really wasn't the answer. She loved him, and she should have shown him her love instead of running away. Good. Asterisk. Saturday morning, Blake picked Riley up at 10 as she'd asked him to do. On their way to River's End, he asked, "So you want me to take you to the diner for lunch?" Yes. Bob is the cook, and he and Kelsey shout at each other, and it's such a fun place. If you're lucky, you'll get to meet Jacqueline and Simon. Jacqueline was single for over 70 years, and she just got married less than a year ago. She's something of a matchmaker, and she sticks her nose into everyone's business. She doesn't sound at all pleasant. Oh, but she is. She talks to fairies and garden gnomes, and the fairies help her to match people. And if you go to her house, even unexpectedly, she's always waiting for you with fresh-baked snickerdoodles. I don't think she's ever baked anything else, but I could be wrong. So she's very grandmotherly? Very. You're going to love her. I promise. She directed him to the cafe. As soon as they were inside, Kelsey came bouncing over to them. Good morning. I was hoping you two would come see me sometime soon. Riley hugged her friend. We need food. Preferably cooked by Bob. Bob's on a roll today, Kelsey said, raising her voice. He's making the milk curdle, he's being so darn difficult. Don't mess with me today, Kelsey. A man's voice shouted from the kitchen. The baby was up all night, and I got no sleep, and I'm just not willing to listen to your nonsense. See? Curdling the milk. Kelsey led Riley and Blake to a table. Even when he's in a bad mood, the man can cook like nobody's business. Breakfast special today is corned beef hash with 2 eggs and 2 pieces of toast. Juice? Coffee? I'll just have a glass of milk, Riley said. I'm not a fan of coffee. I'll have milk as well. Blake realized it was the first time they'd eaten breakfast together, and there was yet another thing they had in common. She really did belong with him. Kelsey hurried off to get their milks, and Blake looked at the menu. I think I'm just going to try the special. I know I am. Anything you eat here is going to be amazing. I promise. When Kelsey came back with their milk, she asked, So? Are you doing the special? Absolutely, Blake told her. 2 specials. Coming right up. As soon as Kelsey walked away, an older woman walked up to them. Riley's heart jumped when she saw Jacqueline, wanting the older woman's insight on her relationship with Blake, though she would prefer to talk to her about it privately. I'm glad you two finally made it here. I've been dying to talk with you. Riley leaned forward, a smile on her face. You have? Jacqueline nodded. The fairies have a message for you. This was it. Her very own fairy intervention in her relationship. Riley felt as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. What's the message? Stop being a fool. And that goes for both of you. Just let things flow as they should and quit worrying about insignificant things. The fairies say you belong together, and that's that. With those words, Jacqueline turned and left the cafe. Well, that was certainly blunt, Blake said. Probably a message we both needed to hear, though. Definitely. And no one can deliver a message like that better than Jacqueline. Riley looked at him with a smile. We got a message from the fairies. I'm so happy. He laughed, shaking his head. It sounds like it's a real milestone in your life. Oh, yes. And I wouldn't change her words for anything. We have been fools. Kelsey brought their breakfast, and they ate quickly. We should head to the bakery in the old west town before we ride into the mountains. You will not believe how delicious the pastries are. That works. I would absolutely adore that. And we might want to get ice cream from the saloon. He laughed. A saloon, huh? Please tell me there's an old-timey church as well. There is. And Pastor Kevin runs it. His wife is Nurse Bridget, and she is the woman who runs the apothecary shop, which is code for first aid around here. Maybe we should just walk through the old west town today instead of riding. Since you haven't seen it yet, you're going to be absolutely amazed. I'd like that a lot. Blake wasn't pleased that it would ruin his plans for the day, but he would bide his time. Seeing the old west town sounded fun, and she obviously wanted to show it to him. After breakfast, she headed straight for the old west town, showing him the general store first. I love this place, because you could show up totally naked and they could outfit you quickly, but there's also food for anyone who is staying here. He looked around, enjoying the touristy things. He picked up a magnet that said Rivers End Ranch and had a picture of Bigfoot peeking around a tree. He wanted to send it to his mother. She loved the things he sent to Missouri from Idaho. "Do you know what the significance of the Bigfoot is?" he asked Riley. "Kelsey is certain that Bigfoot lives up on that mountain," she said, pointing toward one of the mountains that loomed over the ranch. "She's always going there and searching for him." "Well, not as much now that she has 3 little ones, but she used to." "I see. And everyone ran with the idea?" "Not exactly. There are 6 children in the Weston family, and Kelsey is the youngest. She and Danny are twins, but there are 4 boys who are older than the 2 of them, and the boys are always tormenting Kelsey about her beliefs. They have a fake Bigfoot cast that they stomp all over the mountains. Some have done a perfume meant to smell like Bigfoot. They've dressed up in Bigfoot costumes. It's all become a joke that's shared with all the staff of the ranch, as well as the guests. Kelsey talks people into Bigfoot hunting for her as well. Now you know why we're friends." "Have you gone with her?" he asked. "Several times in high school. And she would always see the fake footprints her brother put out, and she'd take pictures of them and pretend she thought they were real, just to mess with their heads. It was hilarious." Riley grinned at him, and he could see how much she'd loved her time on the ranch. "Isn't this ranch your competition?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not at all. This ranch is more about the Western experience, and our hotel is about healing and hot springs. We send people to them, and they send people to us. It's all in a day's work." "I see. I'm glad you have such good friends here." He paid for the magnet and took her hand to stroll along to the next building. They had ice cream in the saloon, and then brownies in the bakery. Then they went to the church so he could see the inside, and he and Pastor Kevin had a lively conversation about what it was like to be a young, single pastor. Of course, Kevin was married, but he had started out before. They went to the bookstore and the art gallery. Then they watched the blacksmith work for a while. The entire place was amazing to him. The only thing that would make it better is if the people who worked here wore period clothing. "I think that would be amazing." "It sure would." They sat for a little while on a park bench, and when they were ready to walk again, she took him toward the lake. As they passed Jacqueline's house, she commented on the gnomes and fairies in the yard. "That's where Jacqueline lives. There are pretty amazing stories about her and her relationship with her gnomes." "She has a relationship with her garden gnomes?" he asked. "Doesn't everyone?" She moved to a quiet spot on the lake where they could see the beautiful blue water sparkling and could actually see to the bottom of the lake. She turned to him. "I'm glad we came here today. This is truly one of my favorite places in the whole world." "I can see why." He took both of her hands in his, looking around, and he realized no one was around, which was nice. He'd been sure it would be packed. "The time we weren't speaking tore me apart. I want you to know that I never want to be away from you that way again. I love you, Riley. I love everything about you." She sniffled. "I love you, too." He pulled her against him and kissed her softly. "I don't know what I've done to deserve you, but I'm sure glad I did it." Resting her face against his shoulder, she sighed contentedly. He wasn't going to break up. He actually loved her. Epilogue. On the evening of June 10th, Riley carefully dressed for her cousin's wedding. She knew that Robin had no clue she was getting married that day, but Riley was going to the wedding with the Reverend who planned to marry them. When Blake knocked on her door, she smiled, looking him up and down. "Well, look who looks all preachery today." He laughed, shaking his head. "I have no idea what it means to look preachery, but I'm happy to do it. Let's head over." Ben promised he'd wait to propose until we were there. "I cut out of school a little early, but I couldn't leave much earlier because we had an exam today." "Sounds good to me." He put her in his car, thinking only of the surprise he had for her at the wedding. He drove them to Robin's house, across the street from his own. He knew that Ben had fixed up the house before Robin had moved in, and he was thrilled they were going to live there together. They had only been there for a few minutes before Ben led Robin to the yard, and they all knew he was asking her to marry him right there and then. Soon, Ben announced she'd said yes, and there was a wedding ceremony, and Riley stood next to her sisters, wiping at her tears. After the ceremony, they had a barbecue and mingled with everyone, but Blake made sure to stay at Riley's side through it all. He led her to a quiet corner of the yard after a while and asked her to sit. When she had, he got down on one knee, pulling a ring box from his pocket. "Riley Quinn, will you spend the rest of your life making me happy?" Riley covered her mouth with her hand as she looked at the ring, and tears sprang to her eyes. "I would be so happy to." He slipped the ring on her finger before helping her to her feet and hugging her close. "Thank you." In the middle of their embrace, Raina and Derek walked over, obviously not caring what they were interrupting. "Let's make it a double wedding," Raina said. "Right after Bobling gets home." The 10th of August. Riley looked at Blake. "I really don't want to wait that long, but I would love for my brother to be there when I'm married. How would you feel about it?" He nodded. "I think waiting for Jake to come home and having a double wedding is perfect." She smiled at her sister. "Sounds wonderful. Now we have to find a cousin who's going to fit my bridesmaid dress, though." Raina laughed. "Like that's going to be a problem." Riley leaned back against Blake, who wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I love you with everything inside me," he whispered for only her to hear. "Me too."